What if the most expensive thing you ever lost wasn't something money could replace? What if the one date you promised would always matter became the one day you secretly hoped would never arrive? Imagine waking up inside a penthouse with a skyline view, luxury cars parked downstairs, a Rolex ticking calmly on your wrist, and still feeling like you're running out of time you can't buy back. Because today isn't about contracts, promotions, or seven-figure deals. Today is September 10th. And today, he remembers exactly what he traded to get here. He thought success would feel louder than silence. That VIP lounges, private flights, and champagne nights would make up for missed calls and delayed apologies. He believed a velvet box with a diamond watch could fix anything he broke along the way. But some promises don't accept luxury upgrades. Some people don't wait for your "after this" deal. And some birthdays don't belong to you anymore once you miss them enough times. In this story, you'll see what happens when ambition slowly replaces attention. When presence turns into promise, and promise turns into later. When the life you build starts looking perfect on paper, but empty in real time. Because by the end of this call, he won't be celebrating her birthday. He'll be confronting the truth about his own. So if you've ever told yourself, just this once, if you've ever believed you could make it up later with something bigger or better, stay with me until the end of this story. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, so you never miss another story told in a way you've never seen before. He woke up on September 10th with the kind of silence that money can't fix, even inside a penthouse with a skyline view that used to make him feel like a king. The calendar reminder hit his phone at exactly 7:03 a.m., glowing through the room like an accusation he couldn't mute anymore. Outside, the city moved fast. Blacked-out SUVs pulling up, luxury cars sliding past glass towers, people chasing bonuses and promotions. Inside, time felt stuck, like a Rolex that still ticks but somehow stopped meaning anything. He thought about sleeping early the night before, just to avoid today, to skip the moment when guilt would walk in uninvited. Because no matter how many wire transfers he made or how high his credit limit climbed, September 10th always found him. And this year, it found him earlier than usual, sitting right on his chest the second he opened his eyes. He reached for his phone like it was going to negotiate with time on his behalf, scrolling through unread messages and late-night calls. There were contracts waiting for signatures, NDAs in his inbox, a high-stakes deal that could push him into seven figures by next quarter. He had meetings scheduled at the VIP lounge, a private table reserved with champagne already chilled. But none of that mattered today, because this wasn't a business date, it was a birthday date. Not his, but the one he promised he would never forget, the one they used to circle in red every year. He tried changing the time on his watch once, like maybe the day would feel different in another time zone. But guilt doesn't care about time zone, and regret doesn't miss flights. He walked across Italian marble floors in socks that cost more than his first rent check ever did. Designer suits hung neatly beside silk shirts, tailored blazers pressed for meetings he suddenly didn't want to attend. The penthouse had a private elevator, a concierge downstairs, even a valet who knew his name by heart. Still, the place echoed like an empty voicemail. Funny how a space filled with luxury bags and gold chains could still feel unfinished. He remembered when success meant finally being able to afford things like this. Now success just meant having more places to feel alone. He poured coffee that came from some rare mountain in a country he'd never visit. Tried convincing himself this was the life he always dreamed of, first-class flights, offshore accounts, bottle service. The kind of life that gets you invited into rooms with skyline views and velvet ropes. The kind of life that makes your parents proud when they tell their friends you made it. But pride doesn't sit across from you at breakfast. And a diamond watch doesn't laugh at your dumb jokes. That's when the date started to hurt a little more. September 10th wasn't just a number anymore. It was a promise with interest attached. They had plans for this exact day once, something simple that didn't require a private jet or a gated community. A dinner, maybe a trip, something small enough to fit in a regular calendar. Back when cash stacks weren't part of the conversation. Back when later didn't mean never. He told himself he'd make it up to her after the next promotion. And then after the next one, and the next one. He checked his call history like it owed him an explanation. Her name wasn't there, not recently, not even as a blocked number. Just unread messages buried under emails about wire transfers and luxury car deliveries. He wondered when the distance actually started. Was it the night he stayed late for a deal? Or the first time he ignored her call during a meeting in a VIP lounge? Either way, time didn't argue, it just moved. He picked up his phone again, staring at her contact like it was a lawsuit waiting to be settled. The truth was simple. They had a plan for this date of the year. And he was supposed to be right there by her side today. If he hadn't messed up. If he hadn't taken too long. If he hadn't traded presents for promise. And as his finger hovered over the call button, he realized exactly where the delay began. There was a time when September 10th didn't feel like a deadline he had failed to meet, but like a promise they couldn't wait to keep. Back when their plans didn't involve private tables or bottle service, just cheap takeout and a view from a regular rooftop. They used to joke about celebrating with something simple, like candles stuck in a grocery store cupcake. No velvet box, no gold-wrapped gift, just time, the one thing he thought he'd always have enough of. She would talk about how one day they'd look back and laugh at how broke they were. And he would promise that no matter how rich he got, he'd never miss this date. Funny how promises sound solid, until promotions start knocking. He remembered how she used to mark the date weeks in advance on her calendar. Not with fancy apps or reminders, just a red circle and a heart drawn beside it. It didn't matter if they were busy or tired, September 10th was untouchable. They had plans for that date every year. Dinner, maybe a movie, maybe nothing at all. The plan was never the point, the presence was. And she made it clear that showing up mattered more than showing off. A lesson he didn't realize he was failing in real time. When the first real opportunity came, a high-stakes deal that could change everything, he told her it was just this once. Just one late night, one missed dinner, one rain check. Because this contract meant security, meant moving out of cramped apartments into gated communities. It meant trading bus rides for a blacked-out SUV waiting downstairs. She nodded, supportive, even proud. But support doesn't stop time from slipping through your fingers. And rain checks don't expire. They accumulate. Soon it wasn't just one night. It was wire transfers, late-night calls, meetings that ran past midnight. VIP lounges became his second home, NDAs his bedtime stories. He started talking in numbers, 6 figures, credit limits, quarterly bonuses. And she started talking less, not because she didn't care, but because she was tired of competing with ambition. Every time he said, "After this deal," she heard, "Not today." Every time he said, "I'll make it up to you," she heard, "Later." And later slowly turned into absence. They had planned a trip once, something small, no private jet, just a drive somewhere quiet. He even picked out a luxury bag he thought she'd love, wrapped in gold paper. But the day came with an urgent meeting he couldn't skip. He promised to celebrate the next weekend, with champagne this time, maybe even a designer gift. Because in his mind, upgrading the apology would fix the mistake. He didn't realize presence has no premium version. And affection doesn't accept wire transfers. There was a night she asked him a simple question over dinner. If you had to choose between a promotion and this date, which one would you pick? He laughed it off, like it was hypothetical, like it would never come to that. But deep down, he already knew the answer. He told himself he was doing it for them, for their future, for stability. For the penthouse with skyline views he thought she'd love. For the life that looked perfect on paper. By the time the money started to flow, so did the distance. Designer suits replaced hoodies, silk shirts replaced comfort. Conversations turned into quick texts between meetings. September 10th became another date he planned around, not planned for. And somewhere between a luxury car delivery and a bonus check. He stopped noticing how quiet her voice had become on the phone. Until the night came when she needed him most, and he didn't show up. Success didn't arrive like a celebration. It crept in quietly, disguised as opportunity and dressed in a tailored designer suit. At first, it was just longer hours and late-night calls that bled into early mornings. Then came the meetings in VIP lounges, the private tables, the handshake deals sealed over champagne. He bought his first luxury car to celebrate, an exotic ride that turned heads at every valet stand. She was proud of him, genuinely proud, even when it meant dinner got cold on the table. He promised it was temporary, just until the next promotion came through. But ambition has a way of moving the finish line every time you get close. Soon, the wire transfers started looking like validation. Cash stacks became numbers on a screen. Offshore accounts grew without effort. He learned how to talk in contracts, how to read NDAs faster than bedtime stories. The concierge downstairs started greeting him by name like he belonged there. The gated community felt safer, quieter, more successful. And every milestone came with applause from people who didn't know what he was missing. He told himself this was what winning looked like. Designer suits replaced his weekend hoodies without him noticing. Italian leather shoes lined up beside silk shirts he barely remembered buying. A brand new Rolex sat heavy on his wrist, ticking louder than his thoughts. He started measuring time in deals instead of days. Meetings replaced movie nights, emails replaced conversations. Even the way he spoke changed, sharper, quicker, always in a rush. Like time was something he could out-negotiate. The VIP lounge became his comfort zone. Bottle service, skyline views, people who clapped when he closed a deal. They called him disciplined, focused, unstoppable. Nobody asked if he was happy, just if he was scaling. He'd laugh along, raising a glass, talking about 6 figures turning into 7. And somewhere between one high-stakes contract and the next, he stopped noticing how often he was saying, "I'll call you back." Her calls started coming at inconvenient times. During presentations, during dinners with investors, during flights in first class. He'd swipe to decline and promise himself he'd call later. Sometimes he did. Most times he forgot. Unread messages got buried under emails about luxury car deliveries. Voicemails turned into silence. And silence slowly became normal. One night, she sent a message that just said, "Are you coming?" He was in the middle of a deal that could double his bonus. The kind of deal you don't walk away from without consequences. So he stayed, telling himself she'd understand. She always did. He imagined her waiting, checking the clock, hearing every passing car outside. He imagined it, and still didn't move. Because money was finally moving. By the time he left the meeting, it was too late to show up without an excuse. Too late to pretend he hadn't chosen ambition again. Too late to believe, next time, would be enough. He typed out an apology he'd sent a dozen times before. Promised to make it up with something bigger, something better. Maybe a luxury bag, maybe a diamond watch in a velvet box. But what he didn't realize was, that night wasn't about gifts, it was about need. It was supposed to be just another quick meeting that would end before midnight, the kind where you shake hands, sign a contract, and walk out feeling like your life just leveled up again. He had promised her earlier that morning that no matter what happened at work, he would make it back in time because this night actually mattered more than any deal. She didn't ask for much, not a private jet, not a luxury bag wrapped in gold paper, not even dinner at some exclusive VIP lounge downtown. All she wanted was for him to be there when the clock hit 9, sitting across from her like he used to before money started talking louder than love. But when the high-stakes deal started moving forward and the bonus numbers began floating around the room like oxygen, leaving suddenly felt irresponsible. Because this wasn't just any opportunity. This was the kind of contract that could push him into 7 figures by the end of the year. And so he told himself that staying a little longer wouldn't hurt anything, not realizing that absence compounds interest faster than any offshore account ever could. His phone buzzed quietly on the glass table while investors spoke about growth projections and market dominance with confident smiles. He glanced at the screen and saw her name light up like a silent question he wasn't ready to answer just yet. There were already 2 unread messages from earlier that evening asking if he was still coming, if everything was okay, if he had left yet. He tapped the screen face down and focused back on the numbers being thrown around like lottery tickets. The room was filled with designer suits, silk ties, watches that cost more than most people's rent, and promises of future wealth. Someone ordered another bottle of champagne to celebrate the progress they were making in real time. And somewhere across town, she was checking the door every time a car passed by her window. At 9:07 p.m., she called again, this time not texting first like she usually did to avoid interrupting his meetings. The vibration of his phone against the marble table sounded louder than it should have in a room full of conversation. He felt the eyes of opportunity watching him, waiting to see how committed he really was to this climb. So he let it ring, telling himself he would call back in 5 minutes once the discussion slowed down. Because love, in his mind, could wait, but money never did. He imagined her sitting there, maybe fixing her hair again, maybe glancing at the clock with that half-smile she used when she was trying not to feel disappointed. And for a second, guilt tapped him on the shoulder before ambition pushed it away. By the time the call stopped, another investor had leaned forward with an offer that could change everything overnight. A wire transfer here, a partnership there, a new client ready to double his credit limit if he played this right. He nodded along, pretending his chest didn't feel tighter with every passing minute. Because he knew she had plans for this date, they both did, something simple but important enough to protect. And he had promised, not once but multiple times, that he would be there tonight no matter what happened. But promises don't close deals, and deals don't wait for anniversaries or birthdays. So he stayed seated while time walked out the door without him noticing. Her third message didn't come with a question this time, just a simple, "Are you on your way?" And that somehow hurt more than anything else she could have said in that moment. He started typing a reply about traffic, about how the meeting ran late, about how he was leaving soon. But before he could press send, someone slid a contract toward him that needed immediate approval. A signature that could secure the promotion he'd been chasing for months. A signature that meant luxury cars, penthouse upgrades, maybe even a private chef someday. And in choosing the pen, he unknowingly chose absence again. When he finally stepped outside hours later, the valet already had his exotic car waiting under soft lights. The city was quieter now, like it had moved on without him while he negotiated with his future. He checked his phone and saw no new messages, no missed calls, just silence where urgency used to be. He thought about driving straight to her place anyway, showing up late with an apology and maybe a velvet box. Because expensive gifts had a way of smoothing out rough edges in the past. But something about the stillness on his screen made the engine feel heavier to start. Like the night had already decided it didn't need him anymore. He sat there for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring at his reflection in the dashboard glass. The Rolex on his wrist ticked calmly, as if nothing had gone wrong at all. Traffic lights blinked between red and green like they were offering choices he had already made. He could still go, still knock on the door, still try to explain why he took so long. But deep down, he knew some delays aren't measured in minutes. Some delays are measured in trust that doesn't regenerate once spent. And that night was the first time he realized she might stop waiting altogether. When she finally spoke to him about that night, there was no screaming, no dramatic exit, no slammed doors echoing through the hallway like in movies. She didn't accuse him of loving money more than her, didn't list the birthdays, dinners, or plans he had missed over the past year. Instead, she sat across from him in that same quiet way she used to when they were just dreaming about the future together. He noticed how calm she seemed, like someone who had already processed the loss before announcing it. There were no tears sliding down her face, no trembling in her voice, just an honesty that felt heavier than anger. Because anger can be negotiated, explained, softened with a luxury gift or an upgraded apology. But acceptance doesn't negotiate with regret once it arrives. She told him she understood what he was trying to build, that she knew the promotions, the contracts, and the late-night deals weren't random choices. She knew he wasn't chasing status for ego, but for security, for a future he thought they would share together. The problem was that the future kept arriving without her in it. Every time he said, "after this deal," the present lost another piece of them. Every time he upgraded his lifestyle with a new luxury car or a penthouse view, something inside their relationship downgraded quietly. She said she was proud of how far he had come, which somehow made it hurt more than criticism ever could. Because pride doesn't fix absence. He tried to respond with logic, explaining how this next bonus would stabilize everything. How the gated community he was eyeing would finally give them the space they talked about years ago. How the private jet trips and concierge services were just tools to make life easier. But she wasn't asking for ease, she was asking for presence. And presence can't be transferred through a wire or wrapped in gold paper. It can't be delivered by a valet or signed off in a contract. It has to be shown up with, physically and emotionally, in real time. So he did what he always did when words weren't enough. He reached for something expensive. A diamond watch he had picked up on a business trip, still sitting in a velvet box. He slid it across the table like it could rewind everything they had lost over the past months. Because in his world, upgrades solved problems, and bigger meant better. But she didn't even touch it. She just looked at it the way you look at a stranger's luggage at the airport. Interesting, but not yours to carry. She explained that she didn't need another luxury bag or iced-out jewelry to remember him by. She didn't need champagne nights in VIP lounges or skyline views from a private elevator. She needed the version of him who showed up on time without checking his emails first. The one who didn't schedule affection between meetings. The one who didn't apologize with something that required a receipt. Because love wasn't a subscription service you could upgrade annually. And she was tired of renewing it alone. He asked her if there was anything he could do to fix it, anything at all that might change her mind. A trip, a promise, a break from work, a different schedule. Maybe they could drive somewhere quiet like they planned years ago. No VIP lounge, no bottle service, just time together. But the offer came too late to feel sincere. Like a voicemail left after the party had already ended. And she had stopped waiting by the door. When she stood up to leave, she didn't ask for the watch back or mention the future again. She simply wished him luck with everything he was building. Said she hoped he found someone who understood his pace. Someone who didn't mind being scheduled around success. The silence that followed felt louder than any argument they could have had. Because breakups don't always sound like crashes. Sometimes they sound like nothing at all, until you realize how much is gone. The money finally started arriving the way he had always imagined it would, not in small steps but in massive leaps that changed everything overnight. 6 figures turned into 7 before the year even ended, and suddenly his name carried weight in rooms he used to dream about entering. Luxury cars lined up in his private parking spots like trophies he didn't remember earning. The concierge downstairs greeted him with the same respect usually reserved for celebrities and CEOs. His penthouse upgraded into something even higher, with a skyline view that stretched for miles in every direction. And the gated community he once promised her became a reality she would never see. Because success doesn't pause to ask who you left behind to get there. He bought things faster than he could emotionally process them. A brand new Rolex that ticked calmly through nights that refused to sleep. Italian leather furniture that no one ever sat on long enough to leave an impression. Luxury bags that remained untouched because there was no one to gift them to anymore. A private chef who prepared meals he often forgot to eat. The place looked like a magazine spread, perfectly curated and painfully quiet. Like wealth had replaced warmth with silence. Business trips became first-class flights that blurred into one another. VIP lounges felt less exciting and more like waiting rooms between obligations. Bottle service lost its novelty once you realized no one was actually celebrating anything. He started noticing how every conversation revolved around bonuses, partnerships, or new investments. Nobody asked about birthdays, missed calls, or unanswered messages. Nobody asked who you wanted to call when the night got too long. Because in those rooms, loneliness was considered part of the cost. Late at night, he would scroll through his contacts like he was looking for something he misplaced. Unread messages from clients mixed with old threads that hadn't been opened in months. He found photos buried between screenshots of wire transfers and contract drafts. Memories of simpler days, when September 10th meant something he protected instead of avoided. Her name still sat there, untouched but never deleted. Like a reminder that success didn't erase history. It just made it harder to face. He thought about calling sometimes, usually after midnight when the penthouse felt too big for one person. But what would he even say now that the empire was built? "Hey, I made it. Remember when I told you I was doing this for us?" None of it sounded right when spoken out loud. Because money might buy comfort, but it doesn't rewrite conversations. And guilt doesn't fade just because your net worth grows. The silence started filling the spaces where ambition used to live. Meetings ended earlier but nights stretched longer. Emails stopped feeling urgent once there was no one waiting at home. The Rolex kept ticking, marking time he couldn't refund or exchange. And every passing day made September 10th feel closer again. Like a deadline he had already missed once before. With interest still accumulating. When the calendar reminder appeared that morning, it didn't feel like a notification anymore. It felt like a warning he had ignored for too long. Because today wasn't about contracts or promotions. It was about the one promise he couldn't upgrade later. The one presence he couldn't replace with champagne or designer gifts. And as he stared at her name in his contacts list again, he realized this might be the only call that still mattered. His thumb hovered over her contact like it was a decision that could undo years of silence with a single tap. The skyline outside still looked impressive, the kind of view that made people feel like they were winning at life. But inside the penthouse, it felt more like a courtroom where guilt had already built its case. He checked the date again just to make sure he wasn't imagining it. September 10th, the same day they used to circle together in red on a cheap paper calendar. The day he once promised would always belong to them no matter how busy life became. And the day he chose ambition over presence one too many times. When the phone started ringing, it sounded louder than any champagne toast he'd heard in a VIP lounge. Each second stretched longer than the last, like time was giving him one final chance to hang up. He almost did, telling himself this wasn't necessary, that she had probably moved on by now. Maybe she was celebrating somewhere else with someone who showed up on time. Someone who didn't apologize with luxury bags or diamond watches. Someone who understood that presence isn't something you reschedule. But the call kept ringing anyway. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice calm in a way that felt unfamiliar. Not cold, not angry, just steady. Like someone who had already made peace with the past. He opened his mouth to explain everything at once, the promotions, the bonuses, the 7 figures. How the private jet flights and gated communities were supposed to be for them. How he thought building an empire would protect their future together. But none of those words fit inside the moment. So instead, he said something simple. I just wanted to call and wish you a happy birthday. There was a pause on the other end that made his chest tighten. Not awkward, just full, like silence that actually means something. He told her he hoped she was doing well, that everything in her life was going right. That even if they weren't together anymore, he still wanted her to be okay. Even if she was okay without him. He didn't mention the penthouse or the luxury car waiting downstairs. Didn't talk about the concierge or the promotion that changed everything. Because suddenly those things sounded irrelevant. Like bragging about winning a race you ran alone. He thought about the velvet box sitting unopened in his closet. The expensive gifts he used to believe could fix anything. And realized they couldn't fix this. She thanked him quietly, like you thank someone for holding a door open. Polite, distant, respectful. No accusations, no reminders of what he missed. Just acceptance wrapped in calm words. And somehow that hurt more than anger ever could have. Because anger meant she still cared enough to fight. Acceptance meant she had already let go. Before the call ended, he said the one thing he should have said years ago. Nobody can replace you. The words felt heavier leaving his mouth than any contract he'd ever signed. Because this wasn't about money or success anymore. This was about time he couldn't buy back. About delays that luxury couldn't erase. And as the silence returned after her reply, he realized the real birthday gift wasn't for her. It was the truth he finally admitted to himself. When the call ended, the silence inside the penthouse felt heavier than it had that morning. Not because of what she said, but because of everything she didn't need to say anymore. He stayed there with the phone still in his hand, staring at the dark screen like it might light up again. Outside, the city kept moving, luxury cars passing by, deals closing somewhere across town. Life didn't slow down just because he finally understood what he had lost. And for the first time in years, success didn't feel like progress. It felt like a receipt for something he could never return. He walked over to the window and looked down at the gated streets below. The exotic car waiting with the valet looked exactly the way he imagined it would years ago. Perfect paint, perfect interior, perfect symbol of everything he worked for. But perfection is quiet when there's no one to share it with. He remembered how they once talked about celebrating this day together. Not in a VIP lounge, not with bottle service or champagne. Just somewhere simple where time actually belonged to them. The velvet box still sat unopened on his kitchen counter. A diamond watch he bought months ago, thinking it might fix something someday. Thinking a luxury gift could replace missed dinners and unanswered calls. Thinking upgrades could patch emotional damage like software updates. But love doesn't have a premium version. And apologies don't scale with your credit limit. He realized that too late. The Rolex on his wrist ticked calmly as if today meant nothing special. Just another day in a life full of contracts and promotions. Another date that didn't appear on his business calendar. But September 10th wasn't just a reminder anymore. It was a mirror showing him exactly where the delay began. Where ambition quietly replaced attention. And where presence turned into promise. He thought about calling again, saying more, trying harder. Explaining the late nights, the private jet trips, the offshore accounts. Explaining how every wire transfer was meant to protect a future together. But explanations don't change outcomes once decisions are made. And regret doesn't process refunds. So instead, he just sat there with the truth. The most expensive gift he had ever given himself. Because this time, the happy birthday wasn't really for her. It was for the version of him that finally admitted he took too long. Too long to show up, too long to listen, too long to understand. He had built an empire in record time. But he had lost something that couldn't be rebuilt with money. And no amount of champagne or designer suits could change that now. So quietly, he whispered to himself, "Happy birthday to me." And as the city lights flickered against the glass, he realized something he had spent years trying to outrun. You can buy timepieces, but not time. You can buy comfort, but not presence. You can buy success, but not forgiveness. And sometimes, the truth arrives wrapped in silence instead of gold paper. Right on the day you promised you would never forget. And now I want to ask you something honestly. At what point do you think he really lost her? Was it the night he didn't show up, or was it every time he said, "after this deal," and chose to stay? Do you believe success justifies absence if the intention was always to build a better future together? Or do you think some promises expire the moment they're delayed too many times? Have you ever been in a situation where you thought you could make it up later with something bigger? Maybe not with luxury cars or diamond watches, but with time, attention, or effort you promised to give when things calmed down. Because sometimes the real cost of ambition isn't measured in hours worked. It's measured in people who stop waiting. So tell me in the comments, do you think she should have forgiven him after that call? Or was it already too late by the time he finally understood the truth? And if there's a song that reminds you of a story like this, leave it down below so we can turn it into something unforgettable next time. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, so you can keep listening to emotional stories told in a way you've never experienced before.